The night had fallen heavy and suffocating over the hollow river, the usual gentle murmur of water replaced by an unnatural stillness that pressed against the skin like a damp shroud. Elias stood at the riverbank, the cold seeping through his worn coat, eyes scanning the dark surface where the lanterns had once floated serenely. Tonight, they did not bob gently, they pulsed, flickered, as if the light inside them struggled to contain something vast and restless. Ada stood beside him, clutching a small lantern that cast a pale halo around her, her breath misting in the chill air. "Father, do you see that?" she whispered, voice trembling but resolute. The river's surface rippled, a sickly green luminescence breaking through the darkness like veins of ghostly fire. Elias nodded grimly. "They're coming." From the depths, pale shapes began to surface, waterlogged and spectral, their bodies dripping and glistening under the lantern light that seemed to cling to their forms like cursed flames. Their eyes hollow orbs, glowing with an unearthly light, locked onto the living with a hunger that twisted the air. The village lay quiet, the only sound the soft lapping of water and the distant rustle of leaves. But the silence was deceptive. As the drowned rose, so too did the whispers faint at first, then swelling into a chorus of mournful, desperate voices that echoed through the night, clawing at the edges of sanity. Elias tightened his grip on his lantern, feeling the weight of generations bearing down on his shoulders. "We have to protect the lanterns," he said, voice low but fierce. "If they take even one, the curse deepens." Ada's gaze hardened. "Then we fight." Behind them, Mara watched from the window, her frail figure silhouetted against the flickering candlelight. Her eyes, wide with fear and sorrow, followed the rising tide of drowned souls. She whispered prayers into the cold air, hoping against hope that the ancient ritual would hold. But tonight, the river demanded more. The drowned advanced, their movements slow and unnatural, as if dragged by chains hidden beneath the water. Their lanterns cast eerie shadows that danced on the village walls, faces twisted by torment and longing. One reached out, fingers elongated and dripping with water, grasping toward the lanterns the family held. Elias stepped forward, voice ringing out over the river's eerie glow. "Back. You will take nothing tonight." A ripple of resistance passed through the spirits, their glowing eyes flaring in reply. Ada moved swiftly beside her father, brandishing her lantern like a beacon of fragile hope. The air thickened, charged with an ancient, terrible power, the boundary between the living and the dead thinning to a fragile membrane. The rivers cursed, light pulsed like a heartbeat. Each flicker a reminder of the price long ago paid and the price yet to come. As the drowned pressed closer, Elias and Ada stood united, the weight of their ancestors and the fate of their family hanging in the balance. The night was alive with foreboding dread. The river's lanterns, no longer mere lights on the water, but the last line between salvation and oblivion, and the battle for the hollow river had begun. The first touch of the drowned was like ice seeping into bone. Elias felt the chill as a spectral hand brushed his arm, cold and clammy, but he held fast. "Not tonight," he growled, stepping forward with fierce determination. Ada's lantern flared bright, casting a circle of golden light that pushed back the darkness. She met the gaze of a drowned figure whose eyes glowed with an unbearable sadness. "Why do you haunt us?" she demanded, voice strong despite the tremor beneath. The figure's lips parted, whispering words lost to the wind, a lament of betrayal and suffering. Ada's heart ached with the weight of their sorrow, but she knew the truth. They were trapped, bound to the curse by the failures of those who came before. Behind them, the village stirred. Curtains twitched, Dogs barked nervously, and Mara's pale face appeared at the window, eyes wide with terror. "Elias, be careful," she whispered, voice cracking with fear. He nodded, but did not waver. "We end this tonight. For her. For all of us." The drowned surged a tide of cold and light, their lanterns flickering wildly as if reflecting the storm of rage and despair within them. The river seemed to rise, water slapping against the banks with growing fury. Ada gripped her lantern tighter, drawing strength from the fragile flame. She glanced at her father, seeing in his steady eyes the fierce love that had carried their family through years of darkness. Together, they faced the rising of the drowned, the cursed light illuminating the boundary between life and death, and the desperate fight to reclaim their future from the depths of the past. The night was far from over. The room was thick with a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the dying fire in the hearth. Elias sat, hunched and lean, his hands clasped tightly as if trying to hold on to the last fragments of his resolve. His eyes, deep-set and shadowed from years of worry, scanned the flickering light that barely illuminated the worn wooden walls of their home. Outside, the river whispered its restless sound that had haunted his family for generations. Ada sat beside him, her slender frame tense but steady. The flickering shadows played across her dark hair, and her eyes, reflecting the river's depths, held a fierce determination that belied her youth. "Father," she whispered, her voice soft but urgent, "we cannot wait any longer. The river is growing darker, the lanterns fading. If we do not act, the curse will consume us all." Elias nodded slowly, the weight of years pressing down on his shoulders. "I know," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "I have tried to keep the rituals, to protect you both, but this is different. The river demands more now." From the next room came the faint sound of a match striking and the soft glow of a candle being lit. Mara's pale face appeared in the doorway, her soft features etched with exhaustion and fear. Her tired eyes met Elias's, a silent plea lingering in their depths. The frailty she now bore was a cruel reflection of the family's dwindling hope. "I will not watch this family be torn apart," Elias declared, rising with a sudden vigor that startled Ada. "Tonight, I will go to the river. I will face the curse, and if it takes me, I will ensure it cannot harm you or Mara any longer." Ada's heart quickened, a mix of fear and pride swelling within her. "I am coming with you," she said firmly. "We face this together." Mara stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Be careful," she implored. "The river's cold embrace is unforgiving." Night fell swiftly, wrapping the village in a cloak of shadow and silence. The river, a dark ribbon winding through the landscape, glowed faintly with the spectral light of the cursed lanterns. Some flickered weakly, others had vanished altogether, swallowed by the mist that seemed alive with secrets. At the riverbank, Elias and Ada prepared their small wooden boat. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, the oppressive quiet broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the hull. Lanterns bobbed on the surface, their cursed light pulsing like heartbeat in eerie rhythm that sent shivers down Ada's spine. Elias handed Ada a coil of rope and a small iron talisman, worn smooth by generations of use. "This belonged to my father," he said. "It will protect us, or at least, it will remind us why we fight." Ada nodded, gripping the talisman tightly. As Elias pushed the boat into the cold current, the mist curled around them like spectral fingers, and the river seemed to hold its breath. Their breaths came out in visible puffs, mingling with the chill night air. Every sound amplified in the silence a distant owl, the creak of wood, the soft splash of oars. The lantern's glow flickered violently, casting ghostly shadows that danced on the water. Shapes flickered just beneath the surface pale, waterlogged figures with glowing eyes, watching, waiting. Ada's heart pounded, but she refused to look away. "We must reach the old bend," Elias said, his voice low and steady. "There, the curse's heart beats strongest. We face it, or we all drown in its shadow." The boat drifted deeper into the river's embrace, the cursed light dimming ominously. Each stroke of the oar pushed them closer to the unknown, the boundary between life and death blurring with every passing moment. Ada glanced back toward the shore, where the faint light of their home flickered like a fragile beacon. "We have no choice," she whispered. "We must end this. For Mara, for us all." Elias reached out, taking her hand, briefly a silent vow shared between them before the river swallowed their path in darkness. As the boat crept forward, the water around them began to ripple unnaturally, and the chilling whispers of the drowned rose on the wind. The desperate measures they had taken were only the beginning, the first step into a darkness that would test every fiber of their courage and love. The night held its breath, and the river waited. The night had settled over the hollow river like a cloak woven of shadows and whispered fears. Lanterns, those spectral beacons bobbing on the water's surface, flickered erratically, their cursed light casting eerie reflections that danced with unnatural life. Elias stood at the riverbank, his weathered hands clenched tightly around a worn wooden lantern, eyes fixed on the restless water. Beside him, Ada's dark hair clung damply to her face, her gaze sharp and unyielding despite the cold that seeped into her bones. "It's here," Elias murmured, voice rough as gravel. "The river's wrath, the curse itself." Ada nodded, swallowing the lump of fear rising in her throat. The stories she'd uncovered in the hidden journal, the whispered warnings of old Tom, all led to this moment. The boundary between life and death was thinning. The drowned souls seeking to reclaim what was lost, their lanterns, their essence, their release. A sudden ripple disturbed the water's surface. Pale figures emerged, waterlogged and spectral, their glowing eyes fixated on the two standing defiant on the shore. The air grew thick with the scent of brine and decay, a coldness that seemed to reach deep into the marrow. Ada's breath hitched as a translucent hand reached from the mist, fingers curling as if to grasp her very soul. She stepped back, heart pounding, but Elias's steady presence anchored her. "Remember the words," he said, voice a low chant rising with the night wind. Together, they recited the incantations of their ancestors, words heavy with history and power. The spectral lanterns on the river flared bright, illuminating the twisted forms of the drowned as they writhed against the invisible bonds that held them. Their cries were silent but deafening, a cacophony of sorrow and rage. Water surged, swirling around Elias's boots, icy and unrelenting. Another hand grasped at Ada's ankle, cold as the grave. She clenched her fists, drawing strength from the memory of her mother, lost to this very curse, and from the fierce determination to save her family. "We won't let you take us," Elias growled, voice breaking through the spectral tempest. Not this time. The river seemed to pulse, its heartbeat a dreadful drum that echoed in their chests. Lanterns flickered wildly, the cursed light wavering between life and death. Then, with a sudden, explosive flare, the spirits recoiled, retreating beneath the turbulent surface. The water stilled, the haunted glow dimming to a faint shimmer. Ada collapsed onto the damp earth, breath ragged but triumphant. Elias sank beside her, eyes scanning the now quiet river. For a moment, relief washed over them like a bomb. Then the crushing weight of what was to come settled back in, "This isn't over," Elias whispered. "The curse is stronger than ever, but we've made our stand." Ada nodded, resolve hardening within her. The river's edge had been a battleground, the line between worlds blurred and crossed. They had faced the darkness and survived, but the lanterns of the hollow river still flickered, waiting. As the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, the river lay calm once more, hiding the restless souls beneath its surface. Elias and Ada rose, shadows among shadows, bound by blood and burden, their fight far from finished. The night had tested them, but the river demanded more, and they would answer whatever the cost. The night had fallen thick and heavy over the hollow river, its waters shimmering faintly with the cursed light that had tormented the family for generations. Elias stood at the river's edge, the cold biting through his worn boots as he gripped the handle of the last lantern tightly. Beside him, Ada's breath came out in visible puffs, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering flames that danced nervously in the evening breeze. Mara remained a few steps behind, seated on a rough-hewn log, clutching a candle close to her chest, whispering prayers that tangled with the sound of the restless river. The air was thick with tension, the very atmosphere trembling with the presence of the drowned. Pale, waterlogged figures emerged like phantoms from the mist, their glowing eyes fixed unblinkingly on the lanterns. Their forms flickered and swayed, neither fully solid nor entirely absent. They whispered in voices that echoed like distant waves breaking on forgotten shores, voices laced with sorrow and fury, demanding what was rightfully theirs. Elias swallowed hard, the weight of the family's burden pressing down on him like a stone. Years of silence, fear, and resigned duty had led to this moment. The ritual was simple in its design, but wrought with pain. Each lantern held the soul of a drowned, a light tethering them to the world. To return them was to grant release, but at a cost no living heart could bear lightly. Ada stepped forward, placing her hand gently on Elias's arm. "We have to finish this," she said, her voice steady despite the cold that crept under her skin. "For Mara, for all of us." He nodded, feeling the surge of protective desperation that had replaced his old skepticism. Together, they waded into the river, the icy water rising swiftly to their knees, sending shivers deep into their bones. Around them, the drowned circled, their whispers growing louder, more insistent, a chorus of lament and longing. Elias lifted the first lantern, its glow warm against the chill night. He lowered it carefully into the water, watching as the flame flickered, then steadied, the light sinking beneath the surface. The spectral figures surged forward, reaching out with translucent hands, their faces a mixture of yearning and relief. A soft wail escaped the river, an eerie lament that resonated in Elias's chest. Ada followed, her movements precise despite the tremor in her fingers. She placed her lantern down, eyes never leaving the water as the light faded below, drawing the attention of the nearest drowned spirit. The figure's glowing eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. In that gaze, Ada saw not just menace, but a profound loneliness, a tragic tether to a past that could not be undone. Back on the bank, Mara's whispers rose in a fragile chant, her candlelight flickering in tandem with the lanterns on the water. Her pale face was etched with both hope and dread, the lines of suffering made sharper by the dim glow. Though frail, she lifted her voice as though it could reach beyond the veil separating the living from the dead. The final lantern trembled in Elias's hands. He hesitated, feeling the full gravity of what he was about to do. This last light represented not just a soul, but the family's collective guilt and hope. With a steadying breath, he released it into the river. The cursed light flared violently, illuminating the faces of the drowned as they cried out in unison, a sound like the breaking of chains and the sigh of long-held grief. Slowly, their forms began to dissolve, melting into mist and shadow until only the soft ripple of the water remained. The river's glow dimmed, sinking into darkness as if the very curse had been drawn back into the depths. Elias and Ada climbed out of the river, dripping and exhausted, their hearts heavy but unburdened. Mara rose unsteadily, embracing them both, the fragile hope in her eyes, a fragile thread binding them together. The family stood in silence, the weight of their sacrifice settling around them like the cold night air. The river no longer glowed with the cursed light, but the scars of the past lingered etched deep into their souls. They knew the peace might be fleeting, a fragile reprieve in an ancient battle between life and death. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the hollow river lay still and dark, a silent witness to the sacrifices made. And though the lanterns were gone, their memory burned in the hearts of those who survived, and in the quiet depths where the drowned once whispered their sorrow. Yet beneath the calm surface, a faint flicker danced, a reminder that some debts are never fully paid, and some lights never truly fade. The morning broke over the hollow river with a lightness it had not known for many moons. Elias stood at the riverbank, the cold dampness of the earth pressing beneath his boots, his gaze fixed on the water's surface. The lanterns, once so bright and numerous, now flickered weakly, their cursed glow fading into a mere shimmer that seemed almost reluctant to disappear. The river, so long a source of dread and binding curse, seemed to exhale a quiet sigh, its restless agitation stilled for now. He felt the weight of the night's horrors pressing down upon his shoulders, yet beneath it was a fragile glimmer of relief. The curse that had haunted his family for generations had been quelled, at least for the time being. Behind him, the house stirred. Inside, Ada and Mara sat close together in the dim room, the flicker of a single candle casting long shadows across their pale faces. Mara's hands trembled as she reached out, seeking Ada's warmth and reassurance. Ada, though still young, bore the hardened look of someone who had seen too much. Her dark eyes, reflecting the depths of the river itself, held a mixture of sorrow and determination. They spoke no words at first, their silence a shared language of grief and fragile hope. "It's over," Ada whispered finally, her voice barely carrying beyond the walls. For now, Mara nodded, tears welling but unfallen. "But the river will remember. We will remember." Outside, the soft crunch of footsteps announced Old Tom's arrival. He leaned heavily on his cane as he approached the porch, his weather-beaten face etched with lines that told stories of countless winters and even more warnings. His beard, thick and tangled, seemed almost to blend with the shadows of the early light. "I see the river's calm," Old Tom said quietly, his voice gravelly but steady. "But peace such as this is a fragile thing. It rests on a knife's edge, as always." Elias looked at him, eyes tired yet alert. "Is it truly over?" he asked. Old Tom's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Over? No, never over. Not while the river flows and the lanterns glow. But there is silence now. A chance to breathe before the shadows stir again." The family stood together in the morning chill, the weight of their ordeal pressing in yet softened by the dawn's gentle light. The village around them slowly awoke, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the supernatural storm that had passed through their lives. The river's surface reflected the pastel pinks and blues of the sky, a serene mask over the horrors that had unfolded beneath its depths. Elias felt the ache of loss deep within his chest, the absence of those who had been claimed by the river, the sacrifices made, the fractures in their family that might never fully heal. Yet amidst the sorrow was a seed of something new, hope. A hope born not from ignorance or denial, but from the hard-fought understanding that some battles, though won, leave scars that shape the future. Ada stepped forward, her gaze meeting her father's. "We survived," she said softly, "and that means there's still a tomorrow." "Yes," Elias replied, the faintest of smiles touching his lips. "Tomorrow, and whatever comes with it." As the lantern's last glimmers faded into the river's embrace, the family turned away from the water, stepping back toward their home, a place forever changed, like themselves, but still a refuge. The hollow river was silent now, but its memory lingered, a haunting reminder of the price of survival and the enduring power of ancestral curses. And so they faced the new day, carrying the weight of the past and the fragile promise of the future, their hearts heavy yet unbroken. The first light of dawn crept quietly over the hollow river, brushing the water with a faint, pale tint that seemed almost hesitant to chase away the night. Elias stood alone at the riverbank, the cool earth damp beneath his worn boots, his gaze fixed on the water's surface. The lanterns, once countless and glowing like restless stars, were now gone. The cursed light that had haunted their lives for so long flickered for the last time in the depths, swallowed by the quiet mist that swirled just above the river's glassy skin. He breathed deeply, the air sharp and cool in his lungs, a mixture of relief and a gnawing sorrow weighing heavily inside him. The river was silent now, no longer echoing with restless whispers or the soft bobbing of spectral lanterns. But silence carried its own burden, a heavy stillness, as if the very water mourned the loss of its own ancient torment. Behind him, the porch light flickered as Ada stepped out, a single lantern cradled gently in her hands. Her dark hair was tousled by a soft breeze, and her eyes, deep and searching, mirrored the river's depths she had come to know so intimately. She moved with a quiet grace, placing the lantern carefully on the wooden railing, its warm glow cutting through the morning haze. "It's over," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Elias nodded, but said nothing. Words felt insufficient, tangled in the web of grief and relief that wrapped around them both. They had survived the curse, yes, but at a cost that no ritual or sacrifice could ever erase. Inside the house, Mara sat near the window, a fragile silhouette wrapped in a thin shawl. The years of fear and loss had worn her down, but her eyes held a softness that belied her frailty. She hummed an old lullaby, a melody that once filled the home with warmth and hope. Her fingers traced the petals of wildflowers she had gathered from the gardener, small act of life amid the shadows of death. The family gathered slowly, drawn by the quiet light of the fading lantern. The room was dim, the air thick with memories and unspoken pain. They sat close, a fragile circle of strength in the face of the darkness that had threatened to consume them. There were no grand words, no promises of easy days ahead, only the shared understanding that life would never be the same. Ada's gaze met her father's. "We did what we had to," she said, the conviction in her voice tempered by the weight of everything they had lost. Elias reached out, his rough hand covering hers. "And we remember," he replied. "The river may be quiet, but the lanterns, they're still with us." Outside, the hollow river flowed on, its surface calm and unbroken. The cursed light had dimmed, but the memory of the drowned lingered like a shadow beneath the water, an eternal reminder of the cost of survival and the fragile line between the living and the dead. As the sun rose higher, the family sat together in silence, the fragile hope of a new day settling over them like a tentative promise. The river had been stilled, but the story was far from over. In the quiet moments between grief and healing, the lanterns of memory burned softly, a haunting light to guide them through the darkness yet to come. The river remained silent, yet the weight of ancestral guilt and love wove itself into the fabric of their lives. And in that silence, they found a measure of peace, fragile, uncertain, but real. But as the water lapped gently against the shore, a faint flicker of light, like the last breath of a candle, lingered just beneath the surface. A whisper of the past, waiting patiently for the future to unfold.